Welcome to a mile deep with myself, Benjamin Owen, and this session we are going a mile deep with Mr. Ankush Jain.
Hey
Welcome.
Ben, how's it going?
I'm really excited about this. So I just want to share who Ankush is from how I see him, and Ankush, you can share a little bit about yourself before we dive into transformation and all things that you're incredible at. Is that I was introduced by Ankush by another fantastic coach, and I enrolled in some conversations with Ankush, and the way that he coached, the stillness, slowness, the preciseness of his coaching, I was like, this guy is something else. He's really, really phenomenal. Really felt heard, understood, and I always left his coaching sessions just so clear on what to do next and actions that really move the needle. And I think that's very, very rare in the coaching space. And I actually enrolled on Ankush's school, which is just absolutely transformational. And what was really lovely, Ankush, and I, I can share this from my lens is watching you personally transform, like this guy that was already world class getting more world class. It's like, I just remember watching you as you created that school and curated the school and the work that you've done. I followed your journey. I'm like really excited for you to share that and just watching, yeah, you just flourish. And so the reason I've asked you to come on today is because I believe that you are an embodiment of transformation, something that's really, really important in the 10x process and going a mile deep. So welcome on the podcast.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here and thank you for that wonderful introduction and I really appreciate the acknowledgement. It means a lot, especially coming from someone like yourself. And I have to say it was a joy to work with you, it was a joy to coach you because coaching really is it's a two-way process. And you showed up so open, so coachable. You really commit to the process. So I think we made a really great team together.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and would definitely recommend. Even as we go through this, it's like finding a really good partnership to coach with is such a powerful thing. And maybe beginning Ankush is like I'd love to know where you started on your personal transformation with coaching, and like how did you get to into the world of coaching? And I think this is something that so many people, when they hear about personal and professional coaching, they don't see people like yourself that often who time in the trenches, done the work, worked with some of the great coaches in the world. What was like the kind of initiation into coaching for you?
Well, I mean, where do you want to start and how long do you have? So I'll try and give you the shorter version because otherwise I could spend 3 hours just on this question. Um, let's just say I was 19. I was at university and I had a friend of mine who was really into personal development and had a lot of confidence issues. I mean, I tried to blag it as you do at that age, but I was very insecure deep down and this was really affecting my personal life at the time. And so a friend of mine kind of started introducing me to the world of personal development, and I was hooked. I mean, immediately, and over the course of my 20s, I spent, for someone in their 20s, I went on holiday here or there, but I would spend my money I got a coach when I was 25. I spent thousands of pounds. I went on programs, flew to Las Vegas for this success workshop. I went to Romania to work with someone. I lived with a coach for a week out there. I did Alexander technique to improve my posture. I mean, just you name it, anything that was like, oh, this could make me a better human. I was really into that, and it's a little bit embarrassing to say, but in my 20s, my focus was really on finding the woman of my dreams. I know it's not really cool for a guy to maybe say that, but I remember reading something early on in my personal development journey, which was, you want to meet a great woman, you got to be a great guy. And it was like that one line, which that kind of was the start of my journey, which was like, yeah, I think I got some improvement to do. there's a gap between where I'm at. I'm like, oh yeah, what would be in a really amazing guy? But that was my journey in my 20s. Um, but it was really interesting because whilst I had improvements and growth, and I'm so grateful for that time, I didn't really go deep enough. And so when I think I was 25, 26, I met a girl, I bought a ring, I was ready to propose, and then I got dumped. So I was like, all right, brush yourself off. Year later, met someone else, or something, maybe a couple of years later, I met someone else. Again, was like, all right, this is the girl of my dreams. And I didn't even get dumped. She just stopped talking to me after we'd been dating for 9 months. I had to phone her up to dump me. It's like I'm assuming we're not like together anymore. Um, and every time that this happened, a lot of my friends would just say, "Look, you just had bad luck. Just get back on the horse." And I knew that wasn't the answer. I was like, "No, there's something that I'm not seeing, um, that is leading to these um, breakups, right? That I was having, and ultimately is because I was still 10 years after starting personal development. I was still very insecure. So I just kept going deeper and deeper, but never did I think I would become a coach. It was a personal thing. It was a hobby. I spent a lot of money on it, but I had my professional career. I was in a corporate job. I had really good career prospects, um, and that were two different lives. But funny enough, after that second breakup that I talked about, I enrolled in this program, which I thought was going to really help me finally figure out women. Yeah, good luck to anyone who wants to do that. Um, but it was actually a leadership program. And the first week was like a couple of things. And I actually spoke about this, funny enough, in the coaching school you attended. Driven versus drawn was one of the concepts in the
Yeah.
first week. Are you driven towards, like a goal? Are you really driving, or are you drawn? Are you being pulled? And I was like, no, I've always been driven. That's interesting. And the whole week was called about designing your life. Now, at the time, like I said, I had this procurement job. I worked for this really quite large company, and I was in charge of, I don't know, like a couple of £100 million of stuff that the company ordered. I was doing contracts, negotiations, and I'd enjoy it. It wasn't bad. I enjoyed the job, or a lot of the job. But when I sat back and asked me, it's like, is this what I was drawn to?
Mm.
No. When I was a kid, if I could say, oh, you can be anything when you grow up, would I have picked working for a building materials company in Wolverhampton, right? Doing like, I knew that wasn't the biggest I could dream. So I spent 2 years like trying to figure out, like, all right, what do I really want to do? And I thought maybe I stay in the same career, but I go and move to Canada because I loved the Canadian accent. Or maybe I go out to the east because that was really out of my comfort zone, or something like this. And I looked around, and I didn't really want to do that, but I was exploring, and I tried. Maybe I need a career change. Now, coaching never came up in my mind. And after 2 years, I was like, right, I'm really going to figure it out. This weekend, I'm going to spend the whole weekend figuring it out. I'm not going to do anything else. So I came back from work on a Friday, and that was it. Friday night, Saturday all day, Sunday all day. I didn't go out and meet my friends. I didn't play computer games. I didn't watch TV. I just sat in my room with a piece of paper and a pen, and I tried to figure it out. And I got to Sunday night, and I was just as confused, if not more confused, than I was on Friday. So I just kept going over the same things over and over again. I was trying to write down what my purpose is, and I was coming out with meaningless statements. My purpose is to live a life of meaning and inspire others, right? Which it's kind of what I'm doing, but it didn't mean anything. It wasn't really tangible. So I went back to work on Monday, and I was a bit disappointed, but I was like, okay, I'm no worse off than I was on Friday. And that evening, when I stopped thinking about it, boom, insight. And I this might sound a bit woo-woo, but it was like I had God speak to me, or I had the universe speak to me, or I had a voice in my head that as I'm cooking said, you should be a coach. And I knew it, like, and it scared the shit out of me
Mm.
because I was like, man, I'm gonna leave this safe corporate salary and job and go and do this thing called coaching. But 10 days later, I'd paid over, several £1,000s to a guy called Jamie Smart and enrolled on his year-long coach training. A few days after that, I'm in London, sitting in a room with 25 people, and I thought I was in the wrong place because I was expecting these real serious business coaches, and I was from that corporate world, and everyone's just really nice and they smiled all the time, and I was like, I'm not really sure, and I almost at the beginning backed out of it, but Jamie said to me, he goes, "Come here and get what you came for." And I was like, right, I don't need to worry about anyone else. I just need to get what I came for. And I've stayed on the path. And now it's been, well, this is going to be my coming up to the end of my 12th year of coaching. And it's just grown and grown and grown. And anything, I had really modest aspirations, by the way. Like, I was happy to take a pay cut from my corporate job to do work that I really enjoyed doing, that was meaningful to me.
Mm.
And I've not had to do that. In fact, it's kind of been the opposite, and I'm at least in line with, if I'd stayed in corporate, the kind of money I would make. I'm at least in line with that, if not, a lot better off than that.
Mm. I love that statement. Is like your purpose in life is to bring your greatest gifts in service to the world. And it's like you have one purpose and many missions. And I was like, it's funny when you see someone like yourself coaching, you're like, gosh, this is like, you can see that you're someone who is very much in his greatest gifts. That you're the way that you show up in a room, how slow you are, how accurate you are with your coaching. Like, I think that watching you coach, I modeled quite a lot from you when I was watching you in the school. Like, I took a lot, not just from the strategic, but also the self side, like how you showed up, how very like, I just loved the speed at which you would govern a session and even deliver a training. And I remember just thinking about, this guy's like, he's operating from his bliss. And I think you get a lot from that. What's really nice to hear is that there was a huge transformation that got you to that point. And so I met you when you just started working with Steve Hardison. And I'm curious, what do you think, like, are the ingredients that are necessary for someone who wants to go? Because, like, your body's now unrecognizable. I could barely make a comment like you actually have a night and day experience with your body. I've heard you talk about your relationship online. What do you think are they almost like the key ingredients at the start of the process that helped you create that transformation? Because do you know when someone, Steve Chandler wrote the book Reinventing Yourself, and I love that, like, the idea that you can continually just reinvent yourself, like actually just shed the the skin of the former self and just improve yourself. And I've done that personally. I could see that with you, but the speed at which you did it was breathtaking. So what do you believe helped you create that shift?
It's a really great question, Ben. And I've had, like, I said to Steve Hardison recently, I said, I feel like I'm my fourth or fifth lifetime, because you've seen me, what, 3 years we've known each other, something like that, maybe less. And you've seen rapid change in that time. But that wasn't the start of my journey, right? Like, if you saw me when I was 19 and I started out in this personal development world, I mean, I was the last person anyone would have thought would be a coach. I was so insecure, so in my head. I used to overthink everything. And a friend of mine, I mean, in my mid-20s, he said, or late 20s, a very good friend of mine, actually the guy who introduced me to personal development, said, he goes, of all the people that, we started university with to the end, he goes, everyone's changed. Everyone does, it's formative years in our life. And he goes, but you've changed more than pretty much anyone else. Right. And he said, and from that moment to, like, now in our mid-20s, whatever we were at that time, he said, you've changed more than anyone else from where they were at the end of university to now. And I said, well, here's the interesting thing. Of all of my friends, and everyone changes when they go to university. I probably made the biggest change from before university to at university. And he said, look, he goes, the interesting thing about you, Kush, the one constant about you is that you're always changing.
Mm.
So to me, it's not about like, here are the 5 things you need. Like this has been, I'm 42 now. So this is like 23-year journey for me. So, and I don't knock anything that happened along the way because it's all been useful. Everything that I did, I had a great experience with my first coach, and there were tons of stuff that I learned not to do. I was his first client, he was just starting out, but it was all useful. And what I would say to people is, as a coach, we have to walk our talk. Now that's very different than being perfect. So I'm not saying anyone has to be perfect because otherwise no one would be a coach. But if we're trying to help people shift in their world and we are not walking our talk, then we don't really have a leg to stand on.
Mm.
And so for me, because this is even true now, like I'm not perfect. There's always different areas in my world. I'm like, oh, I could improve in that area or that area or that area. And I just take one, whichever one is calling me, whichever one I think is the one to focus on. So like you said, I've had a massive body transformation. Last year, I went from 69.5 kilos, and in 6 months I dropped to 56.5. But I mean, I didn't just lose weight. It was lean. I was the most cut I've ever been in my life. It was like 6 pack, 8 pack, whatever. Like I looked amazing. I've never, ever, ever, ever looked like that. But for me, it wasn't about just looking like that. I mean, that was nice, but it was something that I had always wanted that I hadn't achieved. But deeper than that, I was like, I knew it was the nutrition side. I'd exercised, I'd worked out, but I really had low, or it looked like I had low, um, I don't know if motivation is the right word or willpower, but it didn't look like I was able to manage consistently to put good stuff in my mouth. Basically, is the way to put it. It's like, oh yeah, some chips, crisps, burgers, like just junk food. I used to love junk food. And I wanted to have that as just a permanent change in my world, because sometimes I'd have clients ask me about that and I could coach them, but I knew I'm like, yeah, I'm not really living this. So there was a limit to what I could help them with. And so I had a number of my clients who were close clients of mine who were going through their own body transformations, health transformations. And I was like, for me to like, I think it is a privilege to coach. This job is a privilege. We get to fundamentally change people's lives. What a privilege. It's so rewarding. So for me to earn the right to coach incredible men and women, like I don't take that for granted. I've got to be the person that can coach them. So that's like one example, but it's the same everywhere. You've talked about my relationship. I'm constantly learning about relationships. They say the thing that you are was the hardest thing for you to learn is the thing that you're best at teaching. I sucked at relationships. I was had so many misunderstandings. I really thought, oh, when I meet a great woman and she loves me and I love her, then I'm going to really be happy and everything else will work out. Yeah, it doesn't work like that, right? And it's kind of like even now, like I talked about in my 20s, I was trying to be the guy that, is worthy or, um, you know, the equivalent of a great woman. Well, even now I'm a father, I'm a husband. My wife is incredible. My son is amazing. I know every parent thinks that, but I'm very fortunate to have the family that I have, to have the people in my life that I have. Well, again, there's levels to that, and I'm constantly stepping up to like I declare every day that I'm an amazing husband and father. It's not an affirmation. It's a declaration of who I am. This is some of the work that I do with Steve Hardison, and I step into that every single day. How can I
Can
be that? How can I be
you
that? How can I be that?
can I ask you a question? even for my own personal clarification here, Ankush, um, a declaration versus an affirmation. Like, because I think that there is, especially in the personal development space, is that people can, that they affirm, they think, oh, I've got all these positive affirmations, and that like they do these affirmations and then they still feel the same and don't change behavior. But what's the difference between the way that you make those declarations or the thinking behind that? I'd love to just kind of peel the onion a little bit, go a bit deeper, because I think that that's something that I was curious about. I don't do that, but
Yeah.
curious to know what it could entail if I did for like personal transformation.
So as you can see over here, there's a book, this black book, right? That's called The Ultimate Coach. It's written by Amy Hardison. And it started off with Alan Thompson, who was a client of Steve Hardison's. He had one session with Steve, and he said, you're amazing. People need to know about you. And Steve wasn't interested. And I'll give you the short version. He convinces Steve to let me put all this information together, and then you can do whatever you want with it. Right? And um and and then Amy Hardison, who was supposed to work on it for 2 weeks, ended up spending a year turning that raw data and information into a book. But it's not a book about Steve Hardison. It evolved, and there's lots of stories about Steve and his clients, but they call it the Book of Being, and it's a book about the reader. And if I don't know any coach who wouldn't benefit from reading that book. I mean, in whatever way you read it, but if you read it in the way it's supposed to be read, which is you read the back cover first, you read the questions on the back cover, then you read the first 2 pages, which are written by Steve, and then you read the book. And every time you come back to the book, so if you read 5 chapters and you come back, you read the back page again, then the first 2 pages, then you go back to the book. It changes the way that you read the book.
Mm.
Now, in that book, and they're telling all these stories of Steve Hardison. And you got to remember, when I first read and I got to read the first manuscript, I hadn't had a single session with Steve. So I kind of put this guy on a pedestal. He charges $200,000 a year. He's got all these amazing clients and millionaires and billionaires and whatever else. So I kind of was in awe of him. And I read the book, and what is written in one of the chapters is how every single one of his clients, he helps them create a document. And a document is a list of declarations. It's a list of I am statements about who that person is. And I'd heard, no, actually I hadn't heard any at that stage. And I was like, man, I'm not really down with affirmations. I did them back in the day. I did the Tony Robbins thing every day and everywhere. I'm getting better and better. Yes, and I'll do all of that. And it never seemed to stick. I mean, it was better than nothing, but it didn't really seem to make a difference. And I'd kind of got a bit arrogant about it. I got a bit egotistical, like, oh, affirmations are rubbish. And so I have a session with Steve. It was great. I decided to do a 10-hour coaching agreement which was $45,000. It was a lot of money. And I'm thinking, I don't want to do this document thing, right? Like that's not what I'm down for. And I get there, and the very first thing he does on the first session, and by the way, you can't do it on Zoom. He lives in Phoenix. I have to fly over to Phoenix to have these 2-hour sessions in person. So I fly over to Phoenix to have a 2-hour session, and he starts with, "We're going to create a document." And he goes, "This is the foundation of who you are." He goes, and he took me to his neighbor's house, and it's like beautiful 5,000 square foot dream home, but literally the foundations are cracking. And he said people live their lives like that, like, and you see coaches online who are like, "Hey, my life's amazing, look at me," but deep down, like, there's all these issues. So he goes, "We need to fix that." He goes, "We fix that, we can build skyscrapers. We don't get your foundation right, we can't do anything." So
Mm.
I'm like, all right, I'm gonna give in to the process. This guy obviously knows what he's doing. Let me give him the best opportunity to influence and impact me. So um, we start creating the document. Now, what's different to an affirmation is these aren't just a bunch of thoughts. We start with all of the negative thoughts, all of I call them listenings, all the listenings that we have for ourselves, all the ideas and beliefs we have about ourselves that are not useful, disempowering, negative. And then there's a process that Steve took me through that I now take my clients through because, man, it's so powerful. There's a process that Steve took me through where I was able to look at them, and then I did in a second session. I forgive them, forgive myself for those judgments, because they're all judgments. They're judgments of ourselves. And then this kind of sounds a bit crazy. It's not just coming up with new words. There's a process where you tap into your subconscious, and your subconscious comes through you and creates this language. And this is really important. It's what is already more true. You take
Mm.
that disempowering belief and you ask your subconscious, what's more true than this disempowering belief?
Oh, I love that.
Right? And it's created out of that, and there's a bit more to it. But then you create this list of declarations, and then that's just the beginning. Because even though these are a set of statements that are more true than your old beliefs, it's just a starting point, because each one of them is a mountain without a top. Each one of them is, there's no end point to that. I could take any one line, and I've got something like 50, that I could take any one of my declarations, and I could dedicate the rest of my life to being more and more of that. Right.
Mm.
So one of my declarations, like I said, is I'm an amazing husband and father. There's no end to that. Right. Or another one is I'm a role model for my son. Man, my whole life could revolve around that one declaration. So
Mm.
creating the document is just a start, but then it's my commitment to be that. And I say it out loud at least twice a day. I have it framed. It's going to be put up. You can't see it off screen, on my wall up there. Um, all of my clients know it. It's on my website. I've got videos of me speaking it. I mean, it's really the essence of who I am and who I'm creating myself to be. So it's a very, very different to an affirmation, because it's a statement of fact, like this is who I am. And at the same time, it's also a creation, and I look for opportunities to be each one of my declarations every single day.
Yeah, I love that you've gone into depth and explained that, and because I can see the integrity that you operate from with that. Because I've watched your video where you share your document, and I think that even if you're listening to this or watching it, you, if you think about how many times every day you subconsciously um, say things about yourself. Oh, I'm such an idiot. I'm so terrible with time. I'm such a letdown. All these things that you say to yourself, you're programming yourself to be that person. And that's something that I remember listening to one of Barry Michaels' stories about Phil Stutz. And Phil Stutz is the psychotherapist in Hollywood. And anyway, he stood up in a session and he put his hand up and he started talking. And as he sat down, he went, "Oh, I'm such an idiot." And Phil Stutz says, "Don't you ever speak to yourself like that ever again." And he came up, he really like changed his temperament. He got really angry and aggressive. And he said, like, really, he really just told him never to speak to himself like that ever again. And so many people, they fill themselves up with this kind of language, like inner critic, self-beration all the time. And quick question then is like, visiting those positive, those nurturing statements twice a day, do you feel that it's giving you that foundation that you were talking about?
Um, it's deeper than that. Yeah, yes, and there's a deeper thing which is behind the statements. I'm very, very mindful about the language. And, after I did that 10-hour agreement with Steve, I hired him for a year. And, I've got one session of that left, but I've already renewed for another year. So I've had, I don't know how many, like 20, I've had, I think 29 or 30 2-hour coaching sessions with Steve now. And so we've really gone deep into the power of language, and how,
Mm.
like you talk about, we're hypnotizing ourselves every day. Whenever we say things to ourselves, it's a hypnosis. And so I'm so mindful now of the language that I use. And I don't typically talk to myself in that way. I used to, but I don't. And if something comes out of my mouth, or I even think it, like I immediately do the work, I forgive the judgment, and I reinforce what's more true, because I don't want to create that. And people often think that language is just a descriptor. It's not, it's a creator. So if you go, hey, you know what? I see this in the gym. You know what? Nutrition is hard, man. It's so hard for me to eat well. And I'll catch people and I'm like, don't talk like that around me. I go, you are hypnotizing yourself and oh no, no, but this is the way I am. No, it's not. You're just not only describing it in terms of what's happened, you're creating it going forward. So it would be more accurate to say, I found it in the past hard to get my nutrition right. But going forward, I'm committed to changing that. See, that's not like BSing yourself. It's still accurate, but the subtle change in language literally creates your world differently going forward. It makes it easier. And I found in the gym, as an example, I have 20-30% at least more power just because of the way I've changed. I talk to myself, and anyone can test this. Get any kind of weight in the gym that you do, and try and bench press it, try and lift it, try and do whatever. And while you're doing it, tell yourself over and over again, I am weak. I can't do this. I'm weak. And just watch the power drains out of you. Now do the exact same exercise going, I'm strong. I've got this. This is easy. Lightweight, baby. All that sort of stuff, and watch the difference. I mean, you'll get immediate feedback. That's the power of language. That's the power we have to create our own world, even in the physical form.
Yeah, there's a quote by Terence McKenna, is like, our words create our world, and when we know the world, our words create our world, and when we know the words that the world is made of, we can make of it what we wish. And it's like really powerful, like really, really powerful. And when I heard that, I was like, yeah, that is so like opposite my background. My first step into coaching was NLP. They are very, very big on the power of words, and I can hear that it's like the definite language. And even that, I think for a lot of coaches, they forget that is probably your biggest weapon and your biggest aid and your biggest thing is the language that you use in a coaching session. And I remember even in the school, I think a lot of the school, and I wanted to talk about this actually, because like one of the biggest things I got from the school was actually not in the school. And Ankush, we can disclose everything about this as well. Is that I just realized at the end of the school that I'd moved to Dubai, and we were going to be over our days in the UK if I came back to the school. I was gutted. And I remember just really like last minute, saying to you, I can't make it on the weekend. I'd like sat on it. I'd worried about it. I would trying to find a way, but I knew that it was just it wouldn't have been able to come back. And I remember ringing you up, and I was like, I told you about it, and you weren't happy. You're very, very like, clear about that and kind. And you said, Ben, you made a commitment, and I didn't clear that commitment up. And then the word commitment to me, and I was like, really, really, the value I got from that. And I was like, be in my word. I was like, it wasn't my word, and the value that I got from that post, that experience, like it was transformational, because I was like, hang a second, what if I just kept my commitments? What happens if I just made commitments to myself and other people and kept them? Like, like we were talking about integrity and being a coach, and I was like, actually, that was the one place in my coaching where, I got a great body, I'm great with my nutrition, I'm great with coaching. But I was like, that is the place that if I close that gap with my commitments, that's the place that I would get the biggest value from. Anyway, I remember you said that. And then what was really great afterwards is like, we talked about how I could have transformed that experience by clearing up the commitment in advance. And this is something I want to share on the podcast, because Ankush taught me this. It was like, do you know what, Ben? We could have created something if you'd have communicated it earlier. And that's what something was for me. I was like, oh my God, if I would have communicated this way earlier, I could have created something, but I left it too late. And I think so many clients I've worked with afterwards, it was almost like a mirror. Like, I had that mirrored back to me. It's like, do you know what's happened is you just haven't communicated and cleaned up your commitment. And I was like, and having gone through that and become, I would say 10-20% better with that since our last conversation, probably, my life's transformed. I feel so much more in integrity with the things I commit to. I'm very slow at making commitments. Like if I make a commitment to something, I know I'm going to be able to do it. And that was like life changing for me. And I'm really grateful for that. It was a sad experience that I didn't come to the school. I really missed that, and I really was I had a lot of shame around that at the time. But the value that I got from that experience was truly transformational. So yeah, I think it's something that those experiences, they are the things that really shape you as well. So it's not just the positive experiences. I think like one of the biggest things from the school was that for me.
It's a funny thing, Ben. I, I, I think any coach, any client, because I work with coaches and non-coaches, any client I've ever worked with for, I'm not talking about a one-off session or something, but anyone I've worked with over a period of time, every single one, I've had to have a conversation around being their word, integrity, commitment.
Mm.
And it's because in the world that we live in, I don't mean nobody, like this is a factual thing, but for, it's such a small percentage where people are actually the word. And what's so interesting is after we had that experience, so I was someone who taught integrity, I taught people about being their word, I thought I was a role model for it. I went and had some more sessions with Steve Hardison, and we spent 3 sessions, 6 hours, pretty much just talking about being your word. So here's a guy, me, thinking, oh yeah, I get this. I don't need coaching on this. And at the end of those 3 sessions, I was like, man, there's a massive gap between where I think I am and where I actually am. And I'm seeing more and more places where I can clean up being my word to myself, as well as my word to other people. So I was pretty good at being my word to other people, but the word I gave to myself, I wasn't very good with that. So if I said to myself, oh, I'm going to go and work out in the morning, oh, well, no one will know, so I can skip it. That's changed. So now when I speak something out loud and I commit to myself, it's done,
Mm.
right? That has completely changed my entire life. Seeing I have that power to create through just speaking it. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I'll hold my hand up. Am I 100% my word 100% of the time? No. I don't know anyone who is. But it's like as soon as I'm not, as soon as I'm aware, it's cleaning that up, getting back into integrity, strengthening my relationship to my word. And this is true whether you're a CEO, whether you're any kind of leader, whether you're a coach, it doesn't matter. And again, this is about us, in my mind, earning the right to coach, really powerful and successful people is we got to walk our talk. So for me to be able to coach someone on integrity, I got to be in integrity. If I'm not walking my talk on that, I can't, I can share the ideas, I can give someone information, but that's not really powerful. So, you know, um, this is not something that was unique to you, Ben. I don't think it's unique to anyone. I mean, this is something for all of us to see more deeply around being our word. And here's the other thing that I've learned. You asked me earlier on, like, how have I made such rapid transformation? I've dropped a lot of the judgments on myself. So when I mess up or if I mess up, I'm not like, oh, why do you do that? You should know it. There's no room for that because that just gets in the way and it slows down my growth. So
Mm.
now I welcome it where I've got a blind spot that shows up, and it happened, recently. Um, I'm really gentle with myself as best I can because sometimes it's tricky in the moment, but as best I can, I'm really gentle, I'm really loving, and I want to step towards, okay, how can I shift and change this as opposed to like judging myself and beating myself, which is just a complete waste of energy.
Yeah, I love that. That's gonna help so many people hearing that, because I think that's the critical parent voice versus the nurturing parent voice in our head. It's like um I've found that I'm actually really good at that. Like I've been that for a long time, and yet I was sat in traffic the other day, and I was meant to be back for a workshop. I left early, had lots of time, and all of a sudden the traffic just wasn't moving. And from nowhere, this inner critic just came up, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And I was really critical and aggressive towards myself and frustrated. And I was just like, and I spotted it, and I think the win there is not that it doesn't come up. It's just that how quick can you return to that kind, nurturing, loving, and I did, I returned to that kind, loving, nurturing, compassionate version. So when I actually got home and got to the workshop, I was ready to rock and roll. I was in a good place. Which is funny because literally two incidences in the same 2 weeks happened, and the previous one I wasn't. I was totally like a wreck after it. So it was coming up to test my ability to be kind to myself. Um, so one of the things that we talked about before you came on is like you've got so many resources and things that you've created over the years, Ankush, and um, people listening to this podcast who want to go a mile deep. What would you like to kind of share with them or give to them and to help them go that little bit deeper and learn from you or hear from what you do?
Yeah, thank you for this. I've got a way of operating and I've got a way of being which is really helpful for my business. And I think I'd love people to see this too, is my mindset is that I want to give so much value and help people so much before they pay me that two things happen. One, it makes it much more likely someone's going to hire me. But two, people have a really good feeling for what it is. So there's no surprises once we start working together. And if I'm not someone's cup of tea, if they've got a lot of experience of me, then they go, oh, okay, this guy's not for me because they've got a lot of experience. So I really applied that with the coaching school. And, you attended the first year. And last year was not a little bit better than the first year. It was like, it was 100 times better. I mean, it was not comparable. And so now I've got the fun task of, all right, how do I make the next one even better than that? Because it's jumped so much. And I looked across every single place where I could do that. Now, one of the things I have is I have a brochure for the school. And even the first year when I created the brochure, I don't want it just to be like some boring brochure that like I don't like reading brochures. I'm gonna skip through them. What's the price? And just look at one or two things. So I came from a place of how can I make the brochure worth thousands of pounds? And so
Mm.
we did, right? And then last year when I was selling the second school, I could have just put the same thing out again. And I was like, no, no, no. I want to add to this. So we added more stuff to the brochure. This is happening again for the third year. We went through the entire brochure and we've changed it again. We've kept the stuff that was in there before, but we've added to it. And we've put stuff in there from uh, that we talked about in the second year of the school, which we didn't speak about in the first year. We've added links to resources. So, and my kind of business partner slash assistant who's helping me put this together, he was like, "This is amazing because you could sell this." And I was like, "I know, that's the point. I want to make the brochure better than other coaches' paid programs." So when you asked me, is there something that we can give away to your audience? And you said a lot of your audience are coaches. I was like, hey, take the brochure. Not because like, oh, it's the brochure for the school, like it's a sales pitch. No, because there's so much value. If someone goes through that brochure and clicks on all the links and reads it and applies it, I'm telling you, it's going to be better than other programs you would have paid thousands of pounds for. So I'd love people to check that out really from my heart. And I, and this is what's really rewarding for me is I have no qualms telling anyone, people, hey, the school's not for me this year, maybe next year, or, I need to make a bit more money. What I'm like, great. I don't care whether you sign up or not. I know the school is going to fill. It's really that good. But here's a gift from me. Go to the webpage, read the brochure, because I know if you do that, it's going to help you. And so I operate in a world where I know even my marketing is making the world a better place. That's why I love this profession. It's so rewarding.
Yeah, I can endorse that as well. The stuff that I read through, and I remember when you and I were on a call, and you said, Ben, don't don't make a decision, go and read through the website. And I remember reading through the website, and I actually really got so much value from that. So I do. endorse what you're saying there, Ankush. And it's great to actually meet someone who's doing business like you do. I think that's what I really pride myself on is being a WYSIWYG. Like what you see is what you get, and that the experience of going through and buying, coaching from you, the school from you, you really get a really good experience of working with Ankush, and it's a really great experience. So I do commend you on that. And that, I really appreciate it because like seeing like so much authenticity, transparency, integrity in business is so rare. And it's lovely to see that, and like the success that it's given you as well is amazing to watch as well. So I'm really grateful you came on today. Honestly, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I want to ask you if you've listened to the session and you've really enjoyed listening to Ankush about what he does, and you want to go and find out more about his school. All you need to do is go to the 10x Tribe link, which is in the attachment to this podcast, and it will take you to my members area where there's going to be loads of free resources and the video for this conversation, and you can click on it in there and you can get all the stuff that we've been talking about in today's podcast. Thank you so much, Ankush. And I've loved going a mile deep with you today, brother.
Oh, you're most welcome, and I have to really acknowledge you, Ben. It's been such a joy to watch your growth over the last few years, and the work you do is exceptional. I know we've had conversations about the impact that you have on your clients, and I'm so glad that you are doing this work now. You're off on your own, and I don't recommend a lot of coaches, and I would have no qualms in recommending anyone who wanted to hire you because you're exceptional at what you do.
Thank you, man. That means so much. Thank you. Thank you, team. And we will see you on the next podcast.